Ted Cruz is trying to help Trump win re-election. So he released this attack ad. It's the goofiest attack ad of all time. He's going after Bernie. Let's watch.
When Joe Biden is elected president, when we have a Democratic House, Democratic Senate, we can begin the process of transforming this government and our nation.
It's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
If these guys win, we're going to wake up with Bernie Sanders as Secretary of State and get ready to see him embracing Nicolas Maduro and communist Cuba.
But I remember being very excited when Fidel Castro made the revolution in Cuba. I was a kid and I remember reading that. And it just seemed right and appropriate that poor people were rising up against rather ugly rich people.
Many of the ideas we fought for that just a few years ago were considered radical are now mainstream.
Let me give you a friendly little Kyle tip when it comes to dealing with frauds and charlatans and people who might have extreme political views or be ridiculous like Ted Cruz. Here's the Kyle trick. Whenever the crux of somebody's attack against a political opponent are centered around labels, ask them to be more specific. Because as a general rule, when people default to attacking somebody over labels, it's because if you ask them to explain themselves in detail, the attack won't sound all that powerful or bad. So what do? They've been doing this for a long time now with Bernie. But radical socialist agenda. Bernie Sanders might be Secretary of State. And then they clip in things that Bernie said in like the 1970s. And they're like, oh. By the way, at the end, it's supposed to be scary to you that Bernie's saying, you know, many of the ideas that we ran on in 2016 are now mainstream. Yeah, Ted, what are those ideas? Please elaborate. Please proceed. Let's get into the specifics. Again, he has no real strong line of attack, so he just defaults to scary words that are supposed to make you feel bad. Radicals. Socialism. Are you afraid? No, actually, Ted, I'm not, because what Bernie's talking about is like Medicare for all, which is just universal health care, which would catch us up to the rest of the developed world. Every other developed country has figured this out. We haven't. Bernie proposes the solution, and your response is radical socialism. Radical socialism. Again, explain what you mean. He can't do it because if he explains what his attack is over, most people in this country would go, you know, I kind of agree with Bernie on that one. By the way, they have to totally ignore polls because the polls show almost Bernie's entire agenda is popular. On the main policy issues Bernie pushes for, he's popular. Every now and then, see, this is the other trick that they do. They'll pick like one of the few things that Bernie has a take on where he's not in the mainstream, and they'll bring that up over and over and over. I already saw Trump do it. He brought up the, Biden, people supporting Biden want the Boston Marathon bomber to be able to vote. Do you have any idea how excited Republicans get when they find like one issue where the left is not popular? Because they'll talk about that forever. They will talk about that forever. Oh, we got one. We got one where we're more popular than them. This is so rare. Let's use it. Boston Marathon bomber voting. Boston Marathon bomber voting. So, and Bernie, of course, he's uniquely principled. So, like, he'll tell you what he believes, even in the few instances where it's not popular. But most of the time it's popular, and that's why this attack ad is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Bernie is Secretary of State. Sign me up, son. What was Bernie in the news for mostly when it came to the issue of foreign policy? Do you guys remember this? he was in the news for Yemen and Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is doing a genocide in Yemen, killing women and babies. And Bernie Sanders worked with Mike Lee, Republican, across the aisle. He worked with him, and they said, we have to block the United States from continuing to arm Saudi Arabia because they're using these weapons to commit a genocide. They succeeded. It worked, and President Trump vetoed it. Now, I'm supposed to be scared that the guy whose foreign policy, his main achievement in modern history, is trying to stop a genocide, trying to stop us from arming a theocratic dictatorship. What happened, Ted? I thought you were against radical Islam, Muslim extremists. This is the guy who tried to stop arming Muslim extremists. And you're going after him. You're acting like him as Secretary of State would be a bad thing. You know what would happen if Bernie Sanders was Secretary of State? Peace. We would maybe make peace with a bunch of countries that we're not at peace with right now. But that's the thing. Ted doesn't want that. Ted's a hawk. Ted's an old school neocon hawk. He loves these wars. He thinks it's radical socialism to stop wars. Imagine fear-mongering over Bernie being Secretary of State. By the way, Biden would never pick Bernie as Secretary of State. I wish. But even if Bernie was going to be somewhere in the Biden administration, foreign policy is not his wheelhouse. Everybody knows that. Even though he's done great work on it, he's more economic focused. So, but even for that, Biden wouldn't pick him. But you see, it's kind of amazing that they're attacking Biden by going after the ally of his who is most popular, Bernie. Anytime you attack somebody and it's label-based, usually you're doing that because there's no there. I could go around calling everybody on the right who I disagree with a fascist. I could cut an ad going after Ted Cruz and calling him a fascist. But if that's the extent of the ad, him saying stuff in the 1980s mixed with calling him a fascist, if that's the extent of the ad, that's not a good ad. Because you're just throwing out there buzzwords. You're just trying to rile people up without actually making an argument. And that's what Ted is doing here. He brings up like Venezuela as if Bernie would make us Venezuela. Bernie would make us Sweden or Norway or Denmark. He's a social democrat. Mild social democrat. And those countries kick our ass in basically every relevant way. But Bernie is Secretary of State. Yes, he might make it so we don't fight a war against Venezuela, which is a good thing. He might make it so we don't fight a war against Iran, which is a good thing. But no, Ted will fearmonger over that because Ted is a jackass. Isn't it so funny? This is the guy, Donald Trump. Not only did he viciously attack Ted Cruz and accuse his dad of killing JFK, he basically called his wife like unfuckable. And what happened? Ted eventually bent the knee like the little cuck he is. He bent the knee. There's that sad picture of Ted Cruz making a phone call for Donald Trump. Ugh. Now Ted Cruz is he's trying hard for like 2024. He wants to be the next Republican president. And so now he's leaning into, like, you know how Trump is always on Twitter, always firing from the hip? Ted is now trying to do that, but it seems so forced and so obnoxious and so annoying. Ted, give it up. You're never going to be president. You're never going to be president. You got that greasy look, like you're just flat out untrustworthy. Even people who like you probably look at you like, that dude is scheming. Because you got that look to you, dude. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, Ted. Give it a rest. And I wish Bernie was going to be prominent in the Biden administration, because then Biden would be worth voting for.